Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be going live in about 1 minute. All right. Just to be mindful of everyone's time today, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us for our 2026 Leave Law and Compliance webinar. For those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Samantha Jacobs, and I'm the Broker Partnerships Manager here at Tilt. I will be moderating today's webinar, so thank you so much for joining us. Before we get things started, just some quick housekeeping items. We will be recording the webinar and sharing that following, so keep an eye out on your inboxes for that. We also want to make sure that you get the most out of the conversation today and want this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to drop some questions in the chat as we go. I will be monitoring the chat, and I will be sharing those questions with our guests for today. We've got a pretty packed agenda, so we're going to be covering a lot today. We're going to start with the 2026 leave law landscape. So what's coming in 2026, what brokers need to know. Then we're going to get into how brokers can leverage leave management to win and retain clients, featuring one of our broker partners, Archon. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the compliance risks that employers tend to miss and how you, broker, can help your clients avoid it. We're going to close the conversation out today with HR trends that are shaping 2026, led by one of our partners, Wellthy. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to the folks who will be joining the conversation for today. Mark, if you want to go ahead and kick us off, go for it.
Hello, everyone. It's Mark Chai. I'm the National Sales Director at Archon. Archon Benefits is an ancillary benefits general agency. We work all across the country in all 50 states, and really excited to share more about how we support our broker partners and partner up with Tilt.
And hi, my name is Teresa Roma. I manage some of our partnerships here at Wellthy. Wellthy is a caregiving support platform that's typically offered as an employee benefit to really help employees navigate their care journeys, such as parenting needs and caring for aging loved ones or family friends with complex medical needs. Excited for the conversation today.
And hi, everyone. My name is Jessie. I am the Chief Revenue Officer here at Tilt. We are a leave management company. We manage leave in all 50 states. And yeah, I'm very excited about the conversation today and talk about 2026, where we're heading. Okay, I'll kick us off, Sammy. Okay, amazing. I know a lot of you know this, but the leave law landscape is increasingly more and more complex year over year. A lot of our customers are coming to us with questions about how to manage leave in multiple states. A lot of companies have employees that are living across the country, and even now cities are releasing new ordinances and regulations. And so what's happening, and what we've noticed over the past year and even longer than that, you all are getting a lot more questions from your clients about leave and state mandates and how they need to make sure that they're compliant with those leave laws. So we're here as a resource for you. We have an amazing in-house compliance team, and we ensure that our product and also the way we manage leave on behalf of your clients is compliant with every state, city, and also federal law.
Yeah, I would say the employees expecting clarity is something that we hear members all the time when we're speaking with the Wellthy's care team. They really do feel confused. They're overwhelmed and emotionally taxed when they're already considering a leave. And then they're trying to start to understand FMLA and how that is going to be alongside a state program or an employer paid leave. It's kind of really explained as a cohesive whole. So making members really confused when they go to submit the leave, and who are they going to report it to first, and who's going to be paying them? How are they going to receive payment? So these are questions we hear day in and day out. So it's definitely something that we're seeing as a need for employees to get that clarity. So excited to know more about how Tilt is helping that.
It's a great point. Just on that note, one of the things that we really believe in is the ability to automate the things that should be automated, right? So that could be anything from workflows to rules engines to ensuring that employees have the right document at the right time. However, leave, as you all know, is a very human experience and really personal. And so we believe that there are still parts of the journey that should include human touch points and human connection and human support. And I think the pairing of the automation and trying to simplify the complex kind of tasks while also making sure that we're there for those people when they need us the most is what sets us apart. And I know you too, Wellthy, is that employees who need that clarity and need that extra handholding, they have both with the tech and the support. So anyway, that's just kind of how we approach that particular issue. In regard to leave laws, though, there are some things that are definitely emerging and trends that we're seeing in the space. So we have several states that have launched either brand new leave laws or new versions of existing laws. And some things that we're noticing, one is longer duration. So a lot of states are trying to essentially supplement FMLA, so extend it or expand the reasons why you would be eligible for job protection. And then in addition, because we don't have a federal paid leave law, then they are also, obviously implementing their own. And so we're seeing extensions on job protection, on paid leave duration time. And then in addition to those things, also in an increase in types of leaves that are covered. And also on the flip side of that, with more options, longer durations, things like that, also comes increased enforcement. And so the compliance piece of all of this is extremely important because mismanaging a leave can result in very, very expensive lawsuits and a lot of other things there too. So yeah, exciting things, but also need to make sure that you have things buttoned up in order to ensure that you're in line with all of the laws.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, Jesse, earlier of us becoming a more distributed workforce, I think it's more important now than ever for companies that have multi-state employees who are planning to expand into new states to just have a good understanding of what that leave law landscape looks like there.
Absolutely. Some specifics that we should note, and we do have a very extensive leave law report that I think we're following up with. It's also on our website. We do this every year and usually every quarter. We like to give you advance notice of notable changes for the year. And a few things to note here. So Minnesota launched, go Minnesota. So we're seeing an influx of companies that are needing support there. Also Delaware, PFML benefits go live this year. In addition to that, I'm actually from Colorado, so I'm really proud of Colorado's changes, but they introduced NICU care leave, which just side note there, this is something that I think is, I imagine most of us have experienced someone who's close to us, a loved one who has had to experience NICU. We recently had an employee who had a baby in the NICU, and unfortunately the baby didn't make it. And that hits so close to home as a leave company, an employee who went through that herself. And just because a lot of these states aren't offering coverage like this, it does rest on the employer. And so one of the things we like to do at Tilt is advise on things like this, things that might be missing in your policy. But it's a lot. It's a burden a bit on the employer to be able to encompass everything. So these states are starting to pick up things like NICU care leave and so forth. So we love to see it, but it does, again, add complexity. And then in addition to that, California adding more paid sick leave and additional states adding NICU leave. So lots of things coming this year. We've added all of this support to Tilt, and I know we're going to see increased complexity over the coming years as well.
I can share just a personal note that I am one of those that have dealt with being in the NICU, and I'm really thrilled to see the attention given to NICU parents. My twins spent 99 days in the NICU, and then followed by in-home nursing care and years of in-home therapies and specialist appointments. So my maternity leave was over before they even came home, which forced me to like reduce my hours when I went back to work. And it was just so stressful. And I think, wow, like these states are really seeing that. And it would have been amazing and such a huge change in my whole experience if I had the ability to have a NICU leave.
Wow, Teresa, thank you for sharing that. I mean, man, I can't even imagine. That's so hard, especially with working. So yeah, and I think one of the things we notice too when we're talking to employers, and I'm sure all the brokers on the call have experienced this too, it's almost one of those things you don't know you need until you need it. And it's really hard to do it at that point because then you're scrambling, you're being reactive, you don't know if you're doing the right thing. You need to check if you're being compliant. There's so many things that go into it. So being able to think about it early, be proactive, add it to your handbook, things like that, are really, really key.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa, for sharing your story. And I'm so glad that we are starting to have more of these conversations. I think it's an incredibly vulnerable conversation to have, but I also think it's an incredibly important conversation. One question that did come up, Jesse, and maybe you can touch on this, is with these new leave laws that are coming in, right? If I'm an employer and I have employees that are in a couple of these states where there are changes, how does Tilt help to communicate that to employers? Like, do you guys have a compliance team who's monitoring these things? Like, how do you help to support those conversations?
We do. Our compliance team is monitoring this regularly. And we, first and foremost, we make sure that our system is updated so that as soon as something goes live, we're ready to support you. But then also we're sending notices. We're making sure that your customer success manager is talking to you about this well in advance. So if there's anything you need to prepare, then you're ready to do that. So yes, we definitely talk about this early and well in advance before something goes live.
Awesome. And then Teresa and Mark, I'll open the floor to you guys as well. How do you guys help to communicate compliance risks or, any sort of changes to compliance laws to your clients?
Mark, you can go ahead.
Yeah, we leverage, some different technologies out there. And I think it's important to have, meeting your workforce at where they communicate. So whether it's text messaging, whether it's microsites, whether it's digital interactive, benefit guides, I think it's really important to have some sort of communication median that allows your HR team to really share updates when needed. I know that sometimes it could be taxing for an HR team. I think, as we get into, trends we're seeing in the marketplace, there's definitely a need to find ways and meetings to communicate. And, education is probably the most important factor in employee benefits, because you can have the greatest employee benefit program, but if employees don't understand or appreciate or value, then a lot of the work is gone for naught. So yeah, it's really important to have tools and resources, and there's a number of different parties and third parties that we leverage and tap into to provide a better experience for our broker base and clients.
Yeah, I love that, Mark. I love meeting the employees where they are, right? Because we have just such a unique workforce today. I think we have like 5 different generations that are in the workforce. And so being able to meet wherever those clients are, I think that really resonates. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I think our care coordination team on a regular basis, we're mainly focused on supporting people before, during, after the leave of absence with anything that they're going through. But the actual process of completing their leave applications and getting the documentation, that's all something that we handhold members through that process all the time. They come to us just kind of, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need to do, but I know it needs to be done. And we'll sit down and do a video call or a phone call and just go through the whole process and work with organizations like Tilt to make sure it's getting submitted. So it's definitely a very common need and request that we get from our employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you're taking a lot of the work off of the broker's plate of having to know. Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know, right? So being able to be kind of that thought leader in that space, provide that guidance for your broker partners so that they can then focus on bringing, larger value to the company. So thank you for sharing that. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead, and this seems like a good fit for us to go ahead and pass the mic off to Mark so he can share a little bit more about Archon and how they help to support our broker partners.
Thanks, Sammy. Really appreciate it. I'll try to keep this brief, guys, because I know the content's really focused on your questions and how you guys can best support your clients out there. But Archon's an ancillary benefits general agency, and for our perspective, I think it's really unique. We started in 2020 during COVID. I'm one of the co-founders and national sales directors, and I've seen firsthand, the rise of PFL plans, statutory disability plans, and how it's impacting obviously members, but also insurance brokers, employee benefit brokers, as how they need to consult. And I think about an HR team, and I think about the trends we see with how complex it's become to be in HR. I think it's one of the most taxing jobs in our country as far as managing obviously employees, different workforces, but also managing benefits, compliance, different state plans. So one of the trends that I'm seeing that we've seen the last few years is just taking a greater awareness of how important it is to be consultative on ancillary non-medical benefits. I've spent 22 years in the industry, and I can tell you for the first 18, 19 of them, it was typically you see an RFP and they say match current, match current, match current. And what you realize over time is you probably shouldn't match current. You should probably take a look at what the current benefits are and really analyze, is what I have competitive in the marketplace? Does it make sense? I did a project for a broker partner, and we kind of analyzed their book of business. And what we realized is 75% of their clients had groups and short-term disability plans that weren't paying any benefits to their employees. I look at the state of California where I live in, and the EDD state disability has grown from a $1,300 max benefit in 2000 to now a $1,765 benefit per week. And that's incredible to see the rise and how much it's increased in benefit. At the same time, they're also increasing the cost, and those are increasing taxes to members. So, thinking strategically about your benefit plan and realizing, what is the current benefit? What should we be looking at? And then also, keeping the carriers honest, because it's pretty easy for an insurance carrier to go out there and churn out a renewal and maybe give you a rate pass, and you might accept the rate pass as, all right, we got a rate pass, let's move on. It's one less thing to worry about. I would argue that it's probably a good idea to look inside that contract and make sure you have the best terms. So at our company, at Archon, we really design these, what we call RFP quote defaults. And it's our ways of kind of standardizing what should be quoted. And I look at short-term disability, and having plans that don't offset with salary continuation are really important, because you see a lot of HR teams that are trying to normalize or standardize how they handle PFL benefits or parental leave benefits when you have employees in different states. Obviously, that last map had a lot of color on it, and I've seen that state map, or that map, grow and continue to grow with, not just mandatory PFL plans, but voluntary PFL plans that states allow. So it's really important, I think, to take that approach of, having someone in your team really dive into it. And it's hard because a lot of our brokers are really busy managing health insurance and medical plan increases and GLP-1 drugs, and the complexity of that. They're also managing ben admin systems and employee communication. So there's a lot on people's plates. But I definitely seen our success and our growth with our broker partners really allowing us to be kind of their consultative partners, to be agnostic. And I think it's helped tremendously, because I've seen firsthand brokers that are looking to win BOR take the approach of, can we find areas in which we can expose maybe another broker for not being as thoughtful on their approach of lead management. We have, reps all across the country that have worked with brokers. And I've always thought that the most fun I have in this business is helping a broker win BOR. And recently I had a broker that had a prospect they're talking with. And the question that the prospect had to do with actually how to create a better company policy when it results, or with regard to parental leave. And they had a policy for years about paying 100% of salary, and they realized this may not be the best policy from a liability standpoint. Are there other alternatives we could look at to find ways to reduce our potential liability in those scenarios when you have high wage earners that might be going out on a leave of absence, and you have employees in 16 different states? Some states have a PFL plan that's paid for through the state. Other plans don't. Other states don't. And that's the other thing that we've kind of realized is taking a look at employee census data is really important. And obviously it's hard to do oftentimes, but when you're at renewals or 6 months before renewals and you're looking at census, one thing that we do as a company is we always look at an employee census and we look at zip codes. Do we have employees in states that are not situs? For example, I might have a group in California and we might identify that there's 3 new hires in New York. Do we have a New York disability plan? Do we have a New York PFL plan? And time again, being proactive allows us to have allows our brokers to have a conversation with HR. And I think that's part of the key ingredient that we're seeing is finding ways to have conversations where you can be consultative. It doesn't necessarily result in switching carriers or selling new products per se, but I think it's really important to have a holistic approach to employee benefits, which I know a lot of the brokers we work with are so hyper-focused because of health insurance and the challenges of health insurance and the challenge with the cost of health insurance to find ways to reduce healthcare costs that they oftentimes don't have the time to really dive into, what I look at disability benefits or PFL benefits. So I think this is, an ideal time for any broker partner, any consultant to really think strategically about how you could leverage leave and leverage PFL laws into, number one, finding ways to differentiate yourself with another broker consultant. And number two, kind of create a moat around your business. Because I know, the broker landscape is super competitive. It's hyper competitive with agencies popping up and firms acquiring other firms, so to speak. And I definitely think this is a battleground that can really differentiate broker partners as it relates to consulting. And you don't have to be the expert. I think that's the other trend I've realized is that, people are fearful to talk about something they may not be as comfortable talking about. So, tap into resources, obviously the Tilt team, the Wellthy team. There's a lot of great third-party companies out there. I'll name drop Archon as well that can be your third-party subject matter expert, and we can be agnostic and consultative when needed.
Yeah, I love that, Mark. And I like the idea of building a moat around your business, right? So bringing in those partners who can really lend their expertise into that space. Teresa, I know that you and I had a conversation offline about kind of this idea of like a benefit eco space, right? So do you want to share a little bit more about just your experience too?
Yeah, definitely. And I think another thing that brokers should be more in tune with is some of the value added services that are being included with a lot of the ancillary packages. We are obviously getting more partnerships with different carriers where they're including caregiving support as part of their disability, or they're including beneficiary support and part of their life insurance. And those all really tie nicely into different leave services. Part of our offering is also to cross-refer members within their benefit ecosystem. And we're starting to see a lot more employers looking to get more involved with childcare benefits or financial wellness coaching and maybe more specialized mental health support, fertility programs, diagnosis-based options. So it's really exciting to see that the ancillary space is growing beyond the traditional benefits of disability and life, and really starting to look at some of the more day-to-day employee needs that are encompassing the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go into client success story that we shared together, Mark, how would you say successful brokers are leveraging leave with prospective clients? I know you mentioned you throw out like being proactive and building this benefit eco space. Is there anything that you are seeing where brokers are having more success than others? Like, how are they engaging them in the conversation? How are they bringing those partners in?
Yeah, I think it starts by just asking questions. I mean, I think, having that approach of being inquisitive and finding out how they operate and how they handle, how are they currently handling leave? Is it an Excel spreadsheet? How are you handling changes that are happening across the country? How are you handling new hires that might be hired in states that you may not have realized have a state leave plan or a city and a municipal plan? So I think having that inquisitive approach, I think is usually the best approach, and just finding out how they currently operate and then exposing potential areas for opportunities to have conversations about, liability, but more importantly, like making sure that HR team member feels comfortable. Because I think that's the other thing I've seen too is you have, potentially some HR team members that might be unsure and they don't want to necessarily ask questions they might not know the answer to. So having that comfort and that ability to be a safe space to have conversations about, hey, this is a complex, arena. Leave is super complicated. You don't have to be the master or the expert in all of this, but you probably should have resources to go to and contacts within the marketplace to go to help navigate. Because sometimes that answer is we should implement a leave program with an outside vendor. Sometimes we could look at a care solution, or it could be, hey, maybe you want to tap into another HR resource to help and assist.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of great solutions out there on the market when it comes to the leave space. And so I think, to your point, Mark, just asking the right questions with your clients to understand where they're at, future state, where they want to be. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is probably one of the number one questions that I get on my side from broker partners is like, well, I want to be more proactive and I want to engage in the conversation because I see the value, but what kind of questions can I ask? So we do actually have a set of questions that we share with our broker partners of how to engage this, whether it's a renewal meeting or whether you just have a client that you're meeting with, for lunch or whatever it is, to try to drive the conversation. But I think this ties in really nicely into how we were able to bring value to one of our mutual clients here, Mark. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of share a little bit of a story here of a client that Mark and his team brought to us in Q4, exactly like what Mark mentioned, right? He had a client who had some pain points. This broker came to the Archon team and said, can you help to support me here? So just a little bit of background on the company. They're a multi-state company. They're rapidly growing. They're currently in 4 states, but they have plans on expanding beyond that across the country. Unfortunately, they were managing leaves in-house. So like Mark mentioned, they had a spreadsheet they were using. They're just over 155 employees today. However, with plans to grow, they knew that they couldn't stick with that spreadsheet model. Some of the challenges that were brought to us, not only by the Archon team, but through our own discovery, was first and foremost the employee experience. Employees had no idea where to go for state benefits, when to do it, and they just didn't really have a strong understanding of what that process looked like. So they were then going to the HR team to ask those questions. In return, that kind of offered up some gaps in the compliance piece, because the HR team recognized that they really didn't have a strong process in place. Like Mark mentioned, they really weren't the HR experts, so they just didn't really know what they didn't know. They didn't understand what sort of questions that they should be asking. And then that in turn obviously exposed some potential gaps. Are they opening themselves up to potential lawsuits or some sort of penalties by not having the right guardrails in place? As I mentioned previously, they are a rapidly growing company with a really lean HR team. So they really needed a solution that they wouldn't have to worry about outgrowing as they continued to scale. And they needed to make sure that they had a solution that could help to support their intermittent leaves with their employees, since that was something that they were handling in-house. Again, a big compliance risk. So in partnership with Archon, we were able to identify several ways that Tilt would be able to support this client. So first and foremost, Tilt was their single source of truth for leave management. Employees had one place where they could go to submit their leaves, where they could check their leaves, make any changes to their leaves. HR teams had full visibility into those leaves, and they had a dedicated leave success team that they could work with to proactively reach out to the employees on behalf of HR. So like I mentioned, that employee support, obviously, HR is that first line of defense for them. However, they have that Tilt team who is able to help support them through the process. This then obviously helps them with the compliance piece that I mentioned previously. So Tilt was an extension of their HR team, helping to support them. We provided them with a dedicated customer success manager so that HR had somebody that they could lean on. Like Jesse mentioned earlier, we do have an in-house legal and compliance team. So again, as they continue to grow, as they continue to expand in outside states, they have a team who can help guide them and advise them on what sort of leave laws they want to be mindful of. And then finally, finding a scalable solution. So Tilt works with companies that are 5 employees all the way up to 5,000 employees. Like Jesse mentioned, we can support all leave types across all 50 states, including those intermittent leaves, all the way down to the minute. So this was a huge win for obviously Archon, bringing value to the broker, bringing them a solution that could help solve for this huge pain point for their client. But we were also able to help save them a little bit of money. So through our broker partnership with Archon, we were able to help offer additional discounts on pricing, which helped a rapidly growing startup company. We were able to help the broker save time. Obviously, they tapped into their resources, like Mark mentioned, building that moat around their business. And then we're able to bring them a long-term solution that the client doesn't have to worry about outgrowing in a year or two, because Tilt can work with companies that are 150 employees, or if they double or triple in size over the course of the next year, they're not having to rip and replace that solution. So overall, it was a great win for both, I would say, Archon, for the Tilt team. We were able to really provide that holistic value. We got this feedback from the broker partner that they, were excited that they could bring a solution in. And like Mark mentioned, they didn't have to be the expert in this space. They were able to lean on the Archon team to really help do the full evaluation, bring in their partners. So I'm going to pause it there, Mark, if you want to add anything anecdotally here.
Yeah, Sammy, that's a great story. And I'd also like to share too, like the instinct of the broker on this case was, let's find a solution from the carrier. And they were looking at their life disability care and saying, hey, we have XYZ, life and disability with this carrier. Can we though round it out? Well, we did our analysis and we realized, it's not the right solution. So if you're looking for a carrier solution, that means lifting and shifting your life disability with a whole nother carrier and then going through that process. And, I think our value back is really being agnostic. At the end of the day, we don't have a horse in the race. We want the best solution for the client that's going to create the best member experience. We partnered with Tilt several years ago because we realized that it's really important to have a tech-focused solution that only does leave, but also has that human touch and that intellectual capital, which I think is really something I've noticed been missing in the marketplace, where you have entities that will focus only on tech, and you have entities that say, hey, we need a tech plus a human experience. And obviously it was a huge win-win. And obviously from an onboarding standpoint, that's the other question. Tilt was able to onboard the case rapidly, and that was able to meet the client's demands because in their mind, we need this now, and they don't want to be told it's going to take 4 months. So Tilt was obviously a great solution. And, I know we'll continue to win business with brokers and groups across the country.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And we're happy that our implementation for a group like this size typically takes about 4 weeks. So it's not a huge heavy lift for HR teams, which again, we already know that they have so much on their plate. So the last thing that we want to do is throw in a lengthy implementation. So thank you for sharing, Mark. Appreciate it. And it's great partnering with you and the Archon team. So with that being said, we have a lot of success stories like this when we partner together with folks like from the Archon team. I would say the number one question that I typically get from brokers is, again, like, how can I be more proactive, right? Like, I know that these challenges exist. How can I make sure that my clients are, how can I ensure that my clients are compliant, right? How can I expose potential compliance gaps? What do I need to know? And so I think it's really important for us to first start with, like, what are the most important compliance risks, or what are the most common compliance risks that we see in the market? So I think the first thing that we typically see are just eligibility missteps. So wrong eligibility date, or making eligibility decisions without the proper documentation from employees, right? This can have a long-term lasting effect on them. We also see misaligned policies, right? So an FMLA policy conflicts with a company's, PTO or a sick policy. Maybe the parental leave policy doesn't align with bonding rules or state programs, right? Maybe, we've seen it before where an employer leave policy doesn't necessarily match with the benefit plan document state. So these are just common misaligned policies that we see across the board. Payroll inconsistencies are a huge challenge as well. So anything from the incorrect top-up amount, or sometimes we see like payment is issued before the eligibility or the designation is confirmed, that can cause a lot of stress and a lot of challenges for HR folks as well. And then finally, we see a lot of documentation gaps. And I touched on this a little bit earlier in the eligibility missteps. But again, think about either an inadequate medical certification or document. Sometimes it's missing entirely before we're approving the leave. Sometimes there's no really clear record of what the qualifying event is. Maybe an employee is actually should be using PTO for a certain event, but they're filing for leave. Maybe they're missing, or there's incomplete state forms that they're filing. So again, these are just some of the most common compliance mistakes that we see in the market. However, there might be others that you are seeing from your clients as well. But really the biggest thing is that the cost of non-compliance is really high. So all of these things can lead to potential lawsuits or penalties. I know here in the state of California, the average cost of an FMLA lawsuit is about $80,000. It could go all the way up to about $300,000. But I think the biggest thing is really a poor employee experience, which can then in turn lead to higher turnover. So what are some of the ways that brokers can position these compliant pieces in the leave process? So some of the ways that you can combat that is to be proactive in the conversation. So exactly like Mark mentioned, let's go ahead and ask those questions when we're meeting with our clients, when we're meeting with prospects, to help uncover what those potential gaps are or what those potential pain points are. Bring in a total rewards type of approach. Again, so leveraging a team like Archon who can help you build this moat around your program. Bring in a team like Wellthy who can help to support your employees as they're going out on leave. Really bringing that total solution to your clients. And then finally, reframing the conversation from just being a compliance piece to the overall employee experience. Like we've talked on so much today, leave is a very personal experience. And so we think it's really important for you to bring the human to it. And so we really think that by leaning into that and by making sure that you are creating a very strong employee experience all the way from the start, all the way to them when they return to work, we know that that's going to be huge for them retaining, or for you retaining that employee. So these are just some of the biggest compliance mistakes that we see. These are some of the ways that we can help to combat them. And like I said, we're more than happy to share with you some of those questions that you can ask to identify those. But with that being said, I think this transitions really nicely into what are some of the trends that we're seeing in the HR space. So, we've talked about the compliance concern. We've talked about that connection between ancillary benefits and the leave space. So for our HR folks that we are helping to support as brokers, what are some of the trends that they should be aware of for 2026? And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Jesse and Teresa, who are going to talk a little bit more about that. Jesse, go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Sammy. Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit before, but one of the things that we're definitely seeing in the space is that a leave benefit or a leave vendor is actually competitive in the space. So if you are competing for talent, and there's something you want to have a competitive edge when you are recruiting or you're retaining top talent, having a vendor like Tilt or like Wellthy is really important to have in your benefit stack. We also are experiencing a lot of, I like to call it like, there are endless possibilities of leave types. Every scenario is unique. They're little snowflakes. And that really truly is accurate. Every single experience is different. And so being able to have a vendor that treats them as such is really important. A lot of the traditional vendors in the space, if you think about like your carriers of the world, they don't have that kind of personalized touch or way to adjust based on the scenario of the leave. And then the other thing too is, we become more and more tech savvy as we go, just as humans, right? And so the ability to be able to go into Tilt and actually manage your leave as the person taking the leave, completely independent of anyone else if you want to, I think that is key. They can see their next steps, they see their deadlines, they see what they need to do, they can see what they expect for pay, they can file their claims all within the tech. And we're building out even more and more self-serve capabilities. And you can do that on your phone. You can use text messaging. There's a lot of ways that you can interact with us without actually needing to talk to a person if that's what you would want. So these are some of the trends we're seeing, and we're definitely rising to the occasion. Really excited about this year to come.
I'm muted. Okay, Teresa, anything you want to add here before we move on to the next slide?
No, I think going into the next slide, we can really just talk a little bit more about how we're seeing employers budgeting for leave and care in 2026. And one shift really stands out is that these two things are no longer being planned in isolation. Employers are increasingly budgeting for leave and caregiver support together because employees who struggle with care needs feel they need to default to a leave of absence to help with those needs, when in many cases, they really just need guidance and someone to help take some of those care tasks off of their plate. So when a care support structure is in place, they can actually prevent a leave or lower the duration of a leave. Additionally, they've learned often the hard way that how someone leaves the workplace directly affects how or whether they return. And care support plays a huge role in retention, productivity, and the speed to reentry. It provides a continuum of care when that leave is exhausted. We hear a lot of HR people saying, I really want to help my employees. Their leave, they already took a leave and I don't know what else to do for them. So being able to wrap around a whole care continuum program allows them to still say, yes, you're back at work and we know you still need support. Please call a care support concierge. For multi-state employers, forecasting has become much more complex. New paid leave mandates, expanded sick time laws, the specific provisions like the NICU leave, those are all things that mean the employers have to start modeling participation rates and wage replacement rules and how all of this coordinates with the existing PTO and the disability programs. So that modeling is shaping year one budgets far earlier than it used to. And at the same time, we're seeing budgets come from multiple places. Leave and caregiver support isn't owned by just one team anymore. It's depending on workforce needs and company priorities. The spend may flow through the total rewards, might flow through disability, people ops, or even the DEI budgets. So the common thread is that alignment around outcomes, so supporting employees through life events while managing the cost responsibly. Another shift is timing. Renewals are happening earlier and earlier, and employers are asking vendors for much clearer utilization data, more scenario modeling. They want to understand the projected spend, compare year over year trends, and avoid any surprises, especially during compliance-heavy periods. And finally, tax incentives are moving from theory to practice. So there's a growing interest in Section 45F and similar state credits. It's not just as a nice to have, but as a way to meaningfully offset some of the net cost of care benefits. So as paid family and medical leave continues to expand, employers are asking, can these credits help make these programs more sustainable long-term? So overall, 2026 budgeting is about really just being proactive, using the data, coordination, smarter forecasting to support employees while maintaining the financial predictability.
Yeah, Teresa, you brought up renewals, and we know that last year was a really tough renewal season for a lot of brokers and their clients. I mean, we heard upwards of 50% renewals. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, and just the timing of the renewals and, the data that's available. And again, I think that that's where we've seen brokers get really creative at the end of last year of how can we work with this renewal, and what are some of the resources, and just thinking outside of the box. And so really glad that you brought that up there. So yeah, I'll let you go ahead and, with that being said, dive into, now that we've talked about kind of the budget and how HR folks are planning for it, like how are they, shaping the leave, any caregiving decisions that they're making with that budget?
Yeah, thinking about what's shaping leave and caregiving decisions in 2026, the biggest shift is that caregiving has moved squarely into the retention conversation. Caregiver leave is no longer just about parental leave. Employers are seeing a growing number of leave requests tied to elder care, chronic conditions, NICU stays, end of life care, and policies are evolving to reflect that reality. What's especially important is why employers are paying attention. Caregiver support is increasingly connected to retention, equity, and career progression, particularly for women and employees of color who are still more likely to shoulder the caregiver responsibilities. Employers are recognizing that without the right support, these employees are more likely to be the ones to take a step back or stall or exit altogether. Elder care in particular is becoming a major driver of leave. We're an aging population and we have longer lifespans, which is great, but that means employees are coordinating care more for their parents, for their spouses, often in an unpredictable way. This frequently triggers that intermittent leave, which adds a whole nother layer of complexity for both the employees and the HR teams. And that complexity is rising pretty fast. Between the PFML programs, state expansions, different specific rules, HR is trying to juggle the coordination across the PTO and the disability, the payroll systems, especially in multi-state environments. So what used to be just a straightforward leave is now a compliance and operations challenge. Yeah. And then return to work has become a real pain point. Caregiving complications are extending leave durations and making the reintegration harder. We all are hearing about people coming back still post-pandemic of trying to get everyone back to the office, whether that's hybrid or fully coming back. And people really shifted during that time to be able to manage some of those care needs while they were home working. And this is particularly challenging for hourly workers, or second or third shift employees. Even when someone's ready to come back, families often need temporary or backup care to make that return possible. So that's where we're seeing backup care play a really critical role, not as a standalone benefit, but as a bridge into and out of leave and during intermittent caregiving moments that don't really neatly fit into these traditional policies.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you brought that up, Teresa. And we actually just had a call last week with a prospect, and they were talking about how they've traditionally seen a lot of parental leaves and how caregiving is becoming more common within their business. But what was really interesting is she was saying, I have a employee who is going through and they have a major surgery that they have to do, but then they're also taking care of their mother, right? So like there's kind of this intersection as well, where it's not necessarily one leave or another that we're seeing. There's kind of this crossover of that. And so it is a very complex landscape, and it is very important to have people who can help to support with that strategy and to help employers identify ways that they can work with their employees there. So appreciate you sharing that. Jesse, I know that you talk to clients, to prospects, on a daily basis. Anything that you want to add here?
I think just to reiterate the point that I had before, where a lot of teams are taken off guard a bit if they're not proactively thinking about these things and planning. And so a lot of times, I know brokers experience this too, but it's like it's almost an emergency, because it's like they didn't know they needed it until they need it. And then it's like, oh, Tilt, can you help me today? And happy to talk to you today, but we need a little bit of planning to get you up and running. So yes, I think just helping your clients be proactive and think through these types of scenarios and what types of policies you want to have in place. And obviously, we're a great resource for you and your clients as you're thinking through those things. But that way we avoid, as best we can, those kind of emergency situations.
Yeah, the number of times that we've either heard a broker or a prospect on a call say, "When would you like to go live?" And they go, "Yesterday," right?
Yes.
You're like, we'll get that as soon as possible. But yeah, exactly to your point, Jesse, right? Like just being a little bit more proactive versus reactive to the situation. Couldn't agree more with you there. Thank you so much, Teresa and Jesse, for lending your voices to the HR trends that are shaping 2026. We obviously have been doing all of the talking, and so I want to open the conversation up to our attendees. We do have a chat, so if there are any questions that you would like to ask, feel free to do so. I know one question did come up, and so Teresa, Jesse, and if Mark, if you're still on as well. Question is, what is one action that brokers should take coming out of today's session with their clients? What sort of, and then maybe like with that too, what sort of clients should they maybe be proactively reaching out to?
I think from my perspective is asking questions that aren't always inside the traditional box of questions that you ask. Asking them to really highlight, like, what are people going out on a leave for? Because sometimes they don't really have a full grasp of what those reasons are. They know it's a paid family leave. They know it's something, but they don't know the real specifics behind it. And there's a lot of solutions out there that they could be looking at and would bring a ton of value and market differentiation to them if they started speaking to those real pain points that are a real reality for a lot of the workforce.
Yeah, Sammy, I think the thing that comes to mind for me, about 30% of our customers are direct referrals from one of our broker partners. And I bring that up to say that the flip side of that is 70% aren't. And so there are a lot of situations where your clients are coming to us directly because they're looking for something different. They aren't interested in continuing to switch carriers and try and find a better solution, a better experience. And so they go out and they search for something like Tilt on their own. And so we are directly working with your clients. We're directly talking to them and selling to them. And what I hate to see is the broker getting involved later in the process and being caught off guard. I would rather that you all are the folks who are presenting Tilt to your clients and suggesting that they meet with us. I think that's a better path for your client, for you, and your relationship with them. And one of the things that I will say, if I was going to say one action, um, one of the reasons why I decided to have an internal partnerships team and really start building that out with amazing people like Sammy is to give you all a resource and someone to go to on my team to really talk to them about whether we're a good fit for your client. And so you don't have to bring us your entire book of business. I'm not asking for that at all. But what I am saying is, if you think you might have a client who could benefit from having a different leave solution that is a standalone, that still connects with all of their systems like their HRIS, their payroll, their carrier, talk to Sammy. And she'll tell you, she'll be very honest if they're a good fit, if they're not a good fit, and then we can help you propose Tilt proactively instead of your clients finding us kind of on their own. So that's my one piece of advice.
I love that, Jessie. And I think that that's something that's really helpful for brokers to know and to understand, that as part of our partnerships team, in addition to, the preferred pricing and having kind of that one person that you can go to and talk to, is, we're like proactively reaching out to your clients. We're not getting a client name and then all of a sudden I'm blowing up their email inbox. This is just an opportunity for us to, like Jessie said, have a conversation and see whether or not they really are a good fit for Tilt. Are we able to help support them? Is the timing aligning with what they're looking for? What are some of their pain points? We also bring up during the conversation, I was talking to a broker the other day and I said, well, what's driving the conversation today? Why are they looking for a new leave solution? And the broker said, I don't really know. That's a great question. Let me go ask. So sometimes during those conversations, we can uncover some great questions for you to then bring to your clients as well. So, like Jessie mentioned, just as kind of a next step here, and I think that this ties really nicely into kind of how we're going to close the conversation today. First and foremost, thank you so much for attending. We know that you all have very busy schedules. You have a lot on your plate. So thank you for carving an hour out of your day to join us. We will be sending a follow-up email that includes a link to the recording as well as our broker toolkit. So if you were not able to click on the QR code or click on the link in the chat, we will be sending you our broker toolkit, which includes a ton of different resources, as well as contact information for ourselves here at Tilt and then our partners at Wellthy and Archon. More information to come as well, but as a big thank you to all of our broker partners who joined the call today, we will be offering a discounted PEPM and waived implementation for any of your groups who meet with us before the end of March. We really value your partnership. And like Jessie mentioned, we appreciate any opportunity to just have a conversation with you and see how Tilt can potentially help. So keep your eyes out for that. But with that being said, thank you so much. And we really appreciate it and look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you, Jessie. Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Cheers.